We're doing all right. Just still waiting for Hami. So how's your night going, buddy? Hell yeah. Oh, man, I can't wait for this fucking summer to end. Fucking.
All right, mic working, audio's working. All right,
But getting them into a
with that being said, our audio is now live.
awesome, nice. Yeah, I haven't done a live stream in ages. I think like when I deleted my Discord previously was like literally 6 months ago. How long was I off of Discord? Because I took a break from it for a good period of time.
You were
6
off
months?
for
Oh yeah,
yeah, yeah, you were off for a while.
you were gone for a hot minute.
Yeah, I would say it's 6 months. I think I deleted it right after that Fiona bullshit. I was like, I'm done with this shit. I deleted my Discord. I deleted my account, my server, and people were like, "Why did you delete your server? You could have just given it to me, bro. Fucking heckin' attention tokens." I'm like, dude, if you just have a personality, you can build your own community too. You know that, right? I'm just saying. But that's the thing. It's like, I took a break from Discord because I just got tired of like the moderation bullshit, moderating circles and all that crap. I was like, I got so sick and tired of it. I think I've deleted like my server like 3 times at this point, 4 times. I don't know.
I
And
think it's
then
about
somebody
4.
complains. Yeah, I think about 4 times. Like I had the People's Toothbrush, and I got tired of that shit, so I deleted that one. And then I had another server that I don't remember the title of that got uh, maybe 150 people on it. It wasn't bad, but it was a much better community. And then I got tired of it, deleted it, and I think I got down to 50 in the third one. And then we have this one. It's just like I don't really invite anybody to it. You know what I mean? So
That's
it is what
fair.
it is. Like I
I've
like
even
to keep my
noticed.
circle small.
Yeah, I've even noticed, right? Like when you try to build a community, they tend to get a lot of people at first and then they just die out. Like my server right now
Mhm.
has like 117 people in it, but at most there's only like 5 active. If I'm gonna be honest, there's 5 active
Yep.
people daily.
Yeah, I've noticed that for a lot of servers. I had one period at the end of the life of the People's Toothbrush. That's basically what happened. Is because there's a bad beef, and then people just kind of went their own way, and it was like, okay, well, this is boring. So, is what it is. I'm going to be honest with you. One of the reasons why I kind of stopped organizing was because I got tired of dealing with that shit. It's like, oh, you try to organize and then everyone just kind of fucks off. There's bad blood and people aren't happy and then nothing gets done and you just burn a bunch of bridges. That's why I'm just passively uploading videos on YouTube these days because it's like, instead of just organizing, I'm just a guy who gives my 2 cents on the internet. Take it or leave it. It's like, I'm not going to be organizing anything for a little while. So, yeah, I'm here to talk about
What event?
ideas.
What eventually just becomes egotistical dumb shit, or just outright internet cat fights, like it's some fucking Hollywood
Yeah,
web form or something like that. That's what it becomes. Like
we
it's
should.
literally, well, I have
Yeah.
5 people on your server that like me more than you. So you know what? I'm actually the pull. I'm the reason why everyone's here. It's like, who the
Yeah,
fuck are you? What are you talking
literally, I
about?
had a jackass like that on my server. It was like, you might not have noticed, but your server's been dead because I'm not here. I'm just like, oh my god, dude! I
Mhm.
literally had a voice chat of 10 people in it, and you're not like, there's multiple clicks on this group. You're not the only group of people who hangs out on the server. But it's that
Ego,
shit. It's like, yeah, ego.
ego. That's what that
Yep.
is.
And
That's
then,
just an ego.
I tell him that. He was like, well, you're not that popular, Alistair. I'm just like, oh my God, who gives a shit? It's like, I'm just a dude who's giving my 2 cents on the internet. And it's like, you're not the center of the world. And then when you call him out on that bullshit, he's going to accuse you of exactly what he is. It's like, shut the fuck
Yep.
up, faggot. I mean, dang
Bing.
it. Beep. So you get my point.
That's funny.
Is that
We'll
like,
edit it. Don't worry,
it's like
bro.
some people, yeah.
Well, like this
So
is why I've
I'm,
become so largely discontented with a lot of left-wing groups. I'm
yeah,
discontented with DSA. I'm discontented with PSL. I'm discontented with all the MLs for this very
SACP,
reason. They
MLs,
will
all of
yell
them.
in
They're
and then
stupid.
get mad at you for giving your 2 cents. It's like
You
you
remember
can't have
Colt?
any political diversity with them.
Yeah, yeah. You remember Colt? I don't know if you met Colt, but we talk about that retard who was constantly trying to like, I'm the most ML of them all, and it's like, I was getting in an argument with one of Z Diddy Zoltanius's buddies. I don't remember his fucking name, but he was not a bad guy, but he was like, I'm an ethno nationalist, I'm hyper racist and stuff like that. And I was like picking apart all his ideas in the chat, and then fucking Colt, that dweeb, he's like, yeah, dude, I made those arguments. That was me. He starts trying to steal my thunder. I'm like, shut the fuck up, you little bitch. It's like, none of those arguments were yours. And then, I
Yep.
booted him from the chat and he forever had a vendetta against me. He disliked my videos for like a solid week. And I'm just kind of like, this dude wanted to be prima donna, couldn't actually be prima donna, and then like had a baby back meltdown. But no, like there's a mentality on the left of just being the fucking center of attention. I remember getting lectured by a pot smoking dweeb about like how he knew more math than me, and he lived in his mother's basement, never held a job in his life, and he didn't even understand the math. He just had to show that he understood stuff, and they kept telling him like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. He got really insulted at that. God damn, that was over the economic calculation problem too.
Oh my god.
And
You know,
the left is
you
profoundly stupid. I've noticed one thing. I'm gonna bitch about the left because like I've noticed that. It's because like as soon as I started loosening up and speaking as an individual, I get a ton more people engaging with the ideas on their own terms in my own comment section. Than like some kind of like puritanical like bullshit dumbass leftist in my own chat. It's one of the most insulting things. But then they'll come in like the Mac user they are, being like, "No, that's not true Marxism." Just like, what's not true Marxism? Like, explain exactly what exactly point of view of mine is not whatever the fuck you're claiming. Like one guy came in my chat. He's a cool guy and all that sort of stuff. But he's like, you can't debate fascists. Like, Destiny has tried this for ages. And I'm like, Destiny is a fascist, dude. He literally sucks the dick of Israel. Okay, he supports the
Destiny is a
Palestinian
fascist.
genocide.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
to
And
to to
I've told
literally
these.
quote
Yep.
Ortega on this, right? The worst product of fascism is anti-fascism. And the reason that we say this, the reason that we need to take this into account is because what do liberals and generally moderate right-wing positions tend to do? They try to mask themselves as a left-wing and anti-fascist, but then the moment that it comes to deciding between the two, they will always side with the fascist over us. Always. Guaranteed.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
That's
funny
the
to
thing.
me. It really is. It really honestly is. Because you cannot criticize the status quo. And then when it comes to actually acknowledging an existing project, an existing form of fascism, you're like, oh, but they have the right to defend themselves. Oh, but they're not the aggressor. Oh, but they're our ally. Which is it? Are we an imperialist nation that has funded
The
fascist
thing about the
regimes over
left,
fascist regimes again and again? Or are we an anti-fascist superstructure? You can't
the
have it
left
both
always
ways.
pats itself on the back about reaching out to ordinary people, and then it never does. It just reaches out to other leftists,
Yeah,
like every fucking time.
yeah.
Okay, even the people who say I'm reaching out to the working class, and then you ask them like, okay, are you going on some normie chat who's talking about the cost of living crisis? No. Are you just focusing on reading your own books in your own little circle? Yeah, that'd be why. You don't even have to agree with the values. You can just say like, okay, you know what? Rent fucking sucks. It's eating up more than 40% of my income, and I'm broke. And it's on top of that, I'm having to eat ramen, several days in a row because like I don't have enough money until my next paycheck. Okay, that's enough to basically kind of like at least share an experience with somebody. So I'm a big fan of the couple of content creators like Millennial Steam, Philosophical Gamer, and Deconstructing Narcissism. Okay, and the thing that they're all have in common is that they're fucking wage ragers. That quite literally, the only thing they have in common is the fact is they're talking about the cost of living crisis, the cost of housing, and the fact that older generations are quite literally mocking and deriding them over something that they cannot control. Okay. None of these people are Marxists. None of these people care about theory. Okay. They're just talking about and sharing an experience. And the fact is the people who are the Marxists, I had that on my short feed for the longest time. That one dipshit leftist, it's like complaining about even 5% of their income going to rent in the USSR. That person's probably never going to talk to any of these people. They're not going to talk to normies who actually have to pay their bills on time, who don't live with their parents, who, quite literally are wagies, who don't really have a choice to be it. They'll never actually do that because they're stuck in their little bubbles. And if you try to do that, they'll just it's amazing to me. You'll talk to leftists and they will contently pat each other on the back talking about, we're reaching out to the real working class. And then they're just talking to their buddies with theories buddies in the chat. They don't talk about anything related to the cost of living at all. It just baffles me. They don't. And on top of that, worst of all, it's like if you introduce any form of different thought to these people, you try to say, hey, maybe that's not right. Okay, I disagree with this. There's no original thought within these circles. It's all about. You ever notice that with like the vast majority of leftist content creators? You'll notice a common pattern. Okay, they're either talking about news or they're busy citing things. Okay, if I watch Sargon of Akkad or I watch like a right wing, YouTuber and stuff like that, they'll talk about ideas. They'll say, oh, I have the citation, but that's to serve a point to some greater end. Okay, with left wing content creators, more often than not, it's people quite literally just just regurgitating shit that's already existed or giving like a 2 cent commentary on like existing news that's daily. Okay. And no offense to Jason Unruh, he's a cool guy and all that sort of stuff, but he's just Maoist News Network. Okay. He's a news thing. Okay. You listen to, whatever his name is of the Scientific Socialist Network. Oh, he's just doing endless clarifications on already existing theory. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're
Where's the
not wrong
cost?
at all.
Where's the cost of living crisis analysis? Are these people making any reaching? Are these people reaching out? You got the ACP dweebs that think if they become more homophobic than the actual right, that's gonna get them to work with the actual working class. At least Hassan Piker is honest enough to admit that he is a champagne socialist, and streaming is his primary income, and he just kind of like vaguely talks about progressive ideas. And that's ironic, is because everyone loves to call Hassan Piker for being a hypocrite, but the people who are calling him hypocrites are even bigger hypocrites than Hassan Piker.
Okay, it is kind of ironic and funny. You know the story of Chris Smalls, right? The founder of the Amazon Union, of when
Yeah.
he went to Israel after he
Yeah.
came
How'd
back.
that go?
After he came back from Israel, and I was actually just listening to him on the Upstream podcast earlier today, talking about after he came back, it's funny because the left, a lot of left-wing organizations were criticizing him. They were criticizing him for trying to paint this image of Israel as this like fascist, this apartheid scenario, and it's like, okay, so you guys are just
Israel
gonna,
is.
yeah, which it is. So you guys are just gonna sit here in your little bubbles. You're gonna maybe talk about, oh, well, we have shitty wages and that sucks, but you're not gonna do anything about it. You're not gonna put the effort in to actually make any other unions. He said it phenomenally, actually. He's like he said it phenomenally. Name one other contemporary figure, and I'm saying contemporary precisely because of this. Name one other contemporary figure that has actually gone out of their way, constructed a union, constructed movements, actually been in touch with the working class, and actually made an effort at building these network and
Yep.
solidarity movements. This is what the left is, on the large majority of the left, is lacking right now.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the left will focus on culture war politics more than like class politics, which sucks. Is what it is. I'm just gonna give my 2 cents. That's why I talk so much about the cost of living crisis on my channel. That's why I talk about boomers. I talk about BlackRock. I talk about, just generally jackasses who ignore things, that don't really talk about these things, but always find themselves circling back to culture war issues no matter what. Every
Right,
single time. Okay.
right.
That's why I even said in my last video, it's like, I don't really care about anything else other than looking out for the interest of the American worker. And, obviously, here's my problem with, I said this previously, it's like, third worldist leftists are more interested in the workers of other countries than actual workers in their own countries. And then you have the
Yep.
fucking conservatives who are basically just third worldist in denial because they believe that there's no American working class. They're just racist about that in the opposite direction. Okay. So there's really nobody talking about the American working class here. They're both just, magnificently, gaslighting ordinary Americans about the cost of living while they outsource out all the industry to China. They already did that. They outsource the jobs to India, and then they basically, boomers basically buy up these properties and give it to BlackRock, and then, demand us to pay premium prices for their overvalued fucking properties and while telling us to compete against cheap Indian labor. Okay. I don't hear that being talked about by either the political left or the political right at all.
Well, it's all because of this. It's all because of this, right? The left-right dichotomy is being exposed now for what it has long been known for, just nobody's talked about it. It is a false dichotomy. It is not
It
actually
is.
targeting the true reality of what dictates the relations of the vast societies that we live in.
Yeah.
Nobody
And so like I even said that
cares
on my
if
channel. It's like,
you're agreeing with whether homosexuality should be legalized or if abortions are the right of women's bodily autonomy. Nobody's going to talk on that matter because at the end of the day, the worker that cannot pay his rent at the end of the month, the worker who cannot get medical care without going into debt, that's what matters more. That is what matters more,
well, yeah, like
fundamentally.
that. There's a guy whose literal profile pic, and he's roasting boomers in my comment section. Thank God. God bless him. I love that guy. He's got his pictures literally an American flag guy kicking like pride flag guy. Like, dude, It's not hard to talk about class issues and get these people hating boomers and rich people.
It's
It's
really
really
not.
not hard. No, like that's kind of the thing. Like I just kind of realized that as soon as I just started speaking as an individual, I was like, "Oh yeah, dude, you know what? You're paying $3,000 a month in rent. Me too, man. It fucking sucks. You know what? I hate rich people. I
You
hate
know,
boomers. You know?
You know what's funny is that I've now on my Substack, right? I've now wrote two different articles talking about the
Yeah.
ECP. I've wrote an article proposing a system that I architect myself, that I constructed myself for a housing alternative. And I've also just talked about other real economic relatable issues. And what's funny is that I've seen this disconnect with the left where MLs and libertarian socialist and anarchist to even some extent, they'll just they'll just dust it away. But then I can go over here to a conservative working class member. I can go to a working class right-wing libertarian. I can give them the things that I'm saying, and they're going to agree with me. They're going to recognize that corporate America is the direct agent responsible for what is going on. The left is not
Yeah.
doing this anymore.
Well, the thing is that like unironically, all I'm doing is what the ACP failed to do: actually talk substantively about class issues without necessarily going into some fucking gaslight or nonsense about it, right? That's all I'm doing. I'm just doing what the ACP failed to do that they said they were going to do for years, talking about the cost of living crisis, but then they failed to do so, and all they did was bitch about fucking baristas and gay people and furries. Which okay, you know what you do that's fine. Okay, that more power to you. I couldn't give less of a shit. That's your prerogative. You can bitch about furries and gay people and baristas all you want. Call me when you're going to talk about class issues and hating rich people, because then I'm in. Okay, you know what? I'll put all the culture stuff to the side. Be like, okay, cool. We can come around and say, yeah, we don't like rich people. Tell you what, that's the thing. And I'll come to the side. Here's the oxymoronic thing about MAGA communism. I want to give that because I actually do want to make a video on that. What MAGA communists don't understand about MAGA nor communism. Okay, they'll say there's a class resentment within MAGA against corporations, and censorship and all that sorts of stuff, right? And they just still haven't read between the lines of what MAGA is actually saying. It like, okay, yeah, you're right. They are mad at the corporations. They are mad at companies who are being hypocritical about free market capitalism. But that's the point. Okay, they're still capitalists at the end of the day. They want free market capitalism at the end of the day. They're just politely telling these corporations who are hypocritical about that to respect the values that they espouse to every other country on the face of the earth, but then hypocritically, suspend those rules when it comes to the American people. MAGA is not communist. They're not secretly a class populist thing. They still very much value capitalism.
Very
They
much.
just don't want they want the corporations and these rich plutocrats to be consistent on their values. When they say greed is good, they mean extend it for everybody and not just for the existing ruling class. So it is class based to a sense, but it's more or less calling out the hypocrisy of corporate America. That's all it is.
Well, you know what's ironic, right? I don't know if you've noticed recently in the last couple of months, but especially when it comes to, like, example, Turning Point USA and the kind of conservative figures and people that have been surrounding Turning Point USA in recent months that have also been historically or in the past known for affiliating themselves with MAGA, they've been coming out and criticizing the current administration and current establishment for the one thing that MAGA is supposed to focus on that they're not. Make America great again, right? It's not America first anymore. And they've proven this with their relations to
Well, they
Israel.
make
And
Israel great again and make India great again. That's
yeah,
what they
no,
are
no,
now.
literally, this is what is going on. Working class conservatives are waking up to the reality that there's an economic crisis in the country. They are waking up that it doesn't matter left or right, right?
I
Electoral
never thought I
politics have
would see the
proven to be
day
a
where, like,
failure.
more people would be like anti-Israel now than then, but that's where we're here. It's like, they see what's going on. They kind of realize that, their tax dollars, that they're kind of occupied by APEC. Like the thing is most people are aware of that shit nowadays, and they're just like, yeah, we don't care. We don't support this stuff. We don't really care about the sensibilities of APEC or the Zionist lobby in America.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I think that's the reason why you've seen that explosion going on around when it came to like, Charlie Kirk's death. Why everyone immediately, if you go on Twitter, if you go on Poll, if you go on
Yeah.
even some, the rare areas of Reddit that are kind of in between, not right or left, but kind of everybody to some degree, they're all going, no, it was definitely Mossad because Charlie Kirk was talking about,
Yeah,
why do we blindly just give money to Israel? Why is
yeah,
APAC so powerful and prevalent? Why does Trump say, like, made like those weird comments a couple weeks ago going, if I die, I hope helping Israel can get me to heaven. All this really weird shit when it's like, guys,
yep,
we're supposed to be some type of patriotic, nationalist America First movement. You can't be a nationalist and then promote some foreign nation. That's like saying,
yeah,
you're a black supremacist that you say, as a black supremacist, we're supposed to die for like the Puerto Ricans or some shit. That makes
yeah,
no fucking sense. That's so
yeah.
confusing. Or being like a
It
communist,
is.
but you champion the monopoly, man. It's like, what the fuck is happening?
Dude, that's basically the establishment left, like Destiny.
Yeah, it's just, and I think that's kind of the problem. You have people doing the purity run shit. You have people that are going the whole, we have this message and we're totally just not doing it. If you criticize it, we're banishing you from the movement. That doesn't even make sense anymore. And you're having people going to desperate levels. And I think that's why you're seeing right wing Republicans or libertarians, left wing progressives, or basic Democrats kind of going to these fringe sides. It's essentially the platitudes that we have of the basic Democrat as a basic Republican isn't fomenting anything. It's either foreign shit that involves Israel, or it's, oh, we see there's a problem. Like you said, everyone's worried about rent, prices of food, will I ever be able to have a family at this point? And no one's giving an answer.
Yep,
And eventually they will run into the, listen, I know Mike is saying a lot of crazy shit. He wants to, I don't know, blow up Samoa or some shit, but he's helping my kid get fucking food. I'm doing
yep,
this because my
yep,
kid needs to eat. I don't give a shit how crazy he is. He could blow up Mars tomorrow. I don't
yep,
give a fuck. And that's what you're going to push
yep,
people to eventually.
yeah.
Have you guys watched the have you guys watched the Newsroom? Anybody in
I have
here?
not.
Okay. Doesn't matter. It's a film from a couple from years back, a couple of years back. But one of the people in there, well, notably, one of the actors is Jesus, Jeff Daniels. Okay. And pretty much there's this one clip that's really popular online for him talking about how America is not the greatest country in the world anymore. And he lists off all the like rankings that we are as a country, and he's proving to the people in the newsroom that, well, America's not the greatest country in the world. And he's kind of shitting on liberals, he's kind of shitting on electoral politics and all of this. Well, watched that video about 2 weeks ago, and I took that video. I went through all of the points that they came up with, and I looked at the statistics, I looked at the rankings, and I did some research on the modern rankings of what the US ranks in. And I actually have the list right here, so I'm going to read it off. Okay. So right now, as of literally 2025, America ranks in 15th for literacy, 34th for math, 16th for science, 34th in life expectancy, 57th in infant mortality, 4th in median household income, 3rd in labor force, 2nd in exports, 20th in education, 35th in environmental well-being, and 55th in child death rates. We don't rank first. We do not rank the highest or the best in any category except for two. Okay, two, which is the first one being military spending, which we all know, right? Military spending, which America is the greatest intervening body in the world. Second is we rank first in consumption. But what that doesn't also measure is that we are also first in waste, in product waste. So it's
Yep.
funny because even though we might be first in consumption, I think that's purely talking about imports because we are not a industrial economy. We are a service economy, and so we are forced to import everything for the most part. But a lot of things are wasted on the market because it's not profitable. This is the crisis that we
Mhm.
are living in this country right now. This is what people are waking up to right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're essentially reaching the type of fatalistic level of the people have the bread and circus, and the soldiers are paid enough not to start lopping off heads wherever the leaders are. That's kind of where we're at right now. That's not sustainable. We can see
It's
that in
bourgeois
any type of nation.
socialism. It's bourgeois socialism. It is socialism for the rich, it is capitalism for the poor, and it is fascism as a cultural tyranny. And that's just the reality that we're living.
Right. And like, and again, I think this is the reason why people are starting to reach points of desperation, why we're starting to see again people going to the more fatalistic doomer mentality of the right, of like, I don't expect to have a childhood, or I don't expect to have a, an adult life. I'm not going to have the white picket fence, the two kids, the dog, the fucking wife, all that shit. I'm expecting to pretty much die in a trench in Montana because shit went down and we all expect it's happening. Or the left, fucking there is no future. The capitals are either going to put us in a cyberpunk dystopia, or the politicians are going to throw us into a never-ending conflict to where I'm going to live, die in a trench, and my kid's going to be born in the trench, picking up my uniform and taking my place in the front line. Like,
I
there's
mean,
no
if
one
you
really
look
has
at
any hope. And
any,
that's
if
dangerous as hell.
right, if you look at any chart that has measured the wealth inequality of the country from the 80s to the modern day, it has quadrupled. It's literally quadrupled, right? The top 1%, they are literally in charge of 90% of the
Yep.
country's wealth. Okay. The top 1% globally has more than the bottom 50%. The top 1% globally controls 60 to 70% of the world's
Yep.
wealth and resources. This is, yeah, you're absolutely wrong. You're absolutely right. I mean, people are in despair. People are such alienated to the point to where they don't see a point in trying to go on. And so I think that the other lie that is being kind of brought to the forefront and being deconstructed right now is that if you work hard, you can do something, right? That if you everybody starts off in like rough situations, but that doesn't mean that you can't climb the corporate ladder and that you can't
Hmm.
make successes. This is a lie that is being exposed. The fact is,
Yep.
if you work hard, you are going to continue to work hard. And you were only going to get into worse situations throughout your life. That is the majority of Americans' lives. Very rare do people actually work hard and then they end up on top.
Well, yeah, I mean, you essentially get fairy tale status. It's kind of like, out of all the billions of people in fucking history, there's a reason why we only remember a handful, right? Whether it's Caesar, whether it's fucking Adolf Hitler, whether it's George Washington, so on and so forth. We remember those guys because they were like the grew up poor, lived a rich history, and then left a mark in the world for good or for bad. It's very rare that you remember somebody. And a lot of people have realized you're not the protagonist of your own story. You're the NBC that gets killed off of screen. They don't even have the balls to put enough pixels to make you relevant to the life story of whatever the fuck is happening. A lot of people are realizing that. There is no, I'm gonna like Macaulay Culkin this shit and go from a kid that was an upbeat life to I'm now a megastar, or I'm gonna bust my ass working at, let's say, a fucking Walmart and become an Indy 500 company guy selling, I don't
Right.
know, widgets or some shit. That's
Right,
just not gonna
because
happen.
right, because there is a monopolization on the forces of producing wealth, on the forces of production, right? There's a monopolization on the very fabric of how resources are distributed. And because of this, people are recognizing the reality that they live in. They're recognizing their class interests and they are going to start pursuing it. I keep hearing all these people that are like, revolution in America is not possible. Revolution in America isn't going to happen anytime soon.
That's foolish.
No, it can happen now if you choose for it to happen now. Revolution isn't just us taking up arms against the bourgeoisie and having a full on civil war and shedding blood. Revolution is a process of unfolding events that leads to the transformation of society at whole. And this is what I've been trying to prevail to the large majority of the left, and they're just not understanding that. No revolution in history has happened without reconfiguration and without pre-existing conditions to allow for a degree of transformation that is unstoppable. Yeah, feel free, absolutely join in.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to.
Hey,
I
so
realize like there are no moderators beside me in the chat. God damn, I need to mod more people. Wait, no, Maddie's a mod, I think. Oh,
Mod me.
but yeah, no, yeah.
no, I don't deserve mods. So like I'm gonna abuse mod privilege. Just don't make me a mod.
All right, noted.
Well, yeah, and again, I think that this is the problem that we're kind of running into. Like, this is what I talk about when it comes to the right side of politics for the longest fucking time. It again, it used to be back in the day, the people that would talk about, let's say, civil war, the apocalypse, the end of days of normalized society to where it's literally Mad Max and fucking twisted metal just to go to Denny's tomorrow kind of shit outside. It used to be said in jokes. It used to be said in like a LARPing fashion. Now there's more and more people I've seen for the past 10 to 12 years on the internet that used to go, oh yeah, I buy all this kit, I buy this gun because what if the North Koreans invade? Oh, wouldn't that be crazy? So I'm gonna have fun in the field with my boys. Now it's more, no, we're training because we legitimately believe the government is going to start rounding up our family. We do believe the left is going to go ape shit or the right's going to go completely nutters, and it's just a fact of life. I'm not the generation that's going to have a family. I'm going to be the generation that's going to die. My bones and flesh will nourish the soil for the next generation. Like there is no hope, and that to me is terrifying. It's not just happening with the left; it's also happening with the right. And you eventually reach a point where both sides realize, one, it's the monicum of the badge doesn't make you bulletproof, and two, there is no law but the gun. And
That's
once
more
both sides
true
agree to that kind of
now.
shit, it will become brutal as shit.
Yeah, the badge is getting really close to not being bulletproof no more. Is because once the shit starts going down, like I feel bad, dude. Because if you're a cop, dude, and you go into a civil war, it's like the thing. It's no different with like fucking Discord mods. Okay, like I'm gonna be real with you. Okay, you try to be a neutral party because that's the only way civil society works is when you be a neutral party for both sides.
Yep.
But when you have the breakdown of civil society, that badge ain't bulletproof no more, man. Like it's terrifying.
Yep. You are either working for the enemy or you're a loot drop. And this is another thing too that people need to realize. If we, heaven forbid, if we ever reach that kind of point, it's not going to be the schizoid on the left. It's not going to be the psychopath on the right that are fighting in the streets, for the cause and all that. It's going to be the father walking the streets with a revolver that goes, my child is dying of malnutrition. My wife is dying without her medication. I don't know what I have to do to make sure they see tomorrow, but if it means taking you out and your family, I'm willing to fucking do it. That's going to be the most dangerous fucking person there is. You've seen it in Aleppo. You've seen it in Afghanistan. You've seen it in fucking Myanmar. Doesn't matter who's fighting. It's the desperate father and mother that's going, my kids are going to see tomorrow. That's all that fucking matters.
Yeah. Well, like those people can also be cudgeled into a political organization. They'll commit genocides on your behalf. And I always tell people all this damn time, it's like, people will kill on your behalf if you can give them a solution that puts a roof over their head, that feeds them and their families. That's just how it works.
Yep.
It really
You
is.
can
What
you
people
can look
don't
at
realize is that the average person, the average human being, and I know you've talked about it for the longest time, right? People are dictated by
Yes.
material conditions. This post hoc rationalization, this rational thinking, it's a falsification of the real interests that people are driven by. People are always driven by practical thinking. They're going to do pragmatically what is the best for them. That's just it.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it essentially comes down to whether hindsight is 2020, whether it's you're fighting for the Mao Zedong's PLA, whether it's you're fighting with Adolf
Nazis.
Hitler's army or the Nazis or whatever group it is, whether hindsight's 2020 or not. If you were in a position to where again, my child is dying, my wife needs her medication, I don't know what these guys are talking about. They're saying some really wild shit, but guess what? Thanks to them, my kid is not dying of fucking malnutrition. My wife is living one more day because of them. You will have people that will put a blind eye because my family is safe. They don't care. And that's not a moral problem for them. But at the end of the day, we're humans. Human nature dictates as long as my children and my tribe survives, that is all that matters. We can play the
Tribal
morality
warfare.
game all we want.
Tribal
But it
warfare.
really comes down to, is your mom going to be tomorrow? Do I have to bury my dad?
I always tell people are animals at the end of the day.
Yep.
No matter how good of a person you think you are, how nice a person think you are, how much you think you can reason. The thing is basal natural instincts trump everything. Okay?
Yep.
And I was even told my old man this because I got in a conversation with him because he was talking about the whole Charlie Kirk shooting. He's a conservative. He's a good guy and all that sorts of stuff. And I told him straight up, like, there's a difference between Charlie Kirk and there's a difference between Brian Thompson. Okay? Charlie Kirk was shot because of his opinions, which was fucking stupid because, obviously I believe in free speech and I think that's ridiculous, right? But the thing is, people do evil things if they cannot get necessary medication to save their own lives, whether it be insulin or something like that, right? With something like Brian Thompson, okay? The thing is people do insanely evil things to make sure that they have a stable living. It's a fact of life. We can talk about the Native American genocide. We can talk about the genocide that Israel is doing against the Palestinians right now. We can do the genocide against the Jews in Nazi Germany. There's no morality in this. This is survivalship. Okay, people do
Yep.
evil things to make sure that they can
Well,
get by.
well,
Well,
yeah. I mean, it goes along the concept of to call war hell is an injustice on humanity. For there are no innocent souls in hell. In war, it's only innocent that die,
Yeah.
and that's just. I think people going off of the mindset of it would come on, guys, it would never happen here. It would never happen in a million years. Come
It's a
on, 2
cult.
weeks later, bro. It's a
hmm.
cope. Like if you said that shit a week ago before Charlie Kirk, well, guess what? Charlie Kirk got killed. 2 weeks later, bro, nothing ever happens. Oh, so what? Kirk got shot. Oh, so what if Russia invaded Ukraine? Oh, so what if Russia, like America's bombing Venezuelan ships? Bro, nothing ever happens. Come on, calm down, bro. It's like you're moving the goalpost, homie. I understand you're scared. I understand that,
Yeah.
yes, if things went down, a lot of us here are probably going to fucking die. Let's be fair. Like, none of us
Well,
here are
and I've
Jason
been
Bourne. We're not
saying this
John
for a
Wick.
while, right? Like, and maybe this is why I've been more drawn to like the libertarian and like anarchist side of things lately, is because I recognize that people are going to do what is in the best interest for them and themselves first, right? Pragmatically thinking and looking at
Yep.
their material embodiment and conditions, they're going to seek to do what is logical at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, if it comes down to tribal warfare, if it really comes down to survival of the fittest, I'm all about that. I want that because at the end of the day, that will pin something against the ruling class. It will pin
People,
something against existing structures because at the end of the day, there is a monopoly on this violence that is occurring against the working class. The working class is going to have to seek out what is best for them. And it doesn't matter what point of history that we look into. I've always said this. I've always said this, and I'll continue to say it. This. No revolution happened with isolating nationalist and anarchist away from each other. Every revolution in history has required, to some extent, both participating in that
Mhm.
revolution on the same side of liberating themselves for their own material conditions.
Yep.
exactly. Another thing that most people don't realize is that, like, when you talk about a revolution, it doesn't even have to be ideological. It could just be like what November said earlier. It's like, oh, my kid's dying. You need to die. It's that simple.
Yep. I'm not here for a cause. I'm not here because I want to be here. You've given me no choice. We tried the ballot box. We've tried the jury box. The last thing we have is the cartridge box. And again,
Yeah.
that can flip at a fucking moment. Like you can look at the English Civil War. You can look at the Spanish Civil War. You can look at the Spartacus Uprising and the Freikorps of Weimar
Mhm.
Germany, or hell, even the Bolshevik Revolution of Russia. If you ask somebody 5 years before the fighting happened, or even a year before the fighting happened, they would probably tell you, dude, come on. There's no way in hell people are going to
Never
pick
gonna.
up guns and go fight the government. They're not going to fight the police.
We
You're not
had
going
the
to
czar
see.
for 300 years.
Yeah, exactly. Like for example, like look at what happened with the Soviet Union. 1991, December 25th, the fall of the
Mhm.
Soviet Union, the Battle of Moscow. If
Nobody
you
would have
asked
seen
somebody
such
a
a thing.
week ago
Nobody.
if
Nobody
that
would
was
have
going
said
to
that.
happen, yeah, no one would have believed that.
Well,
That sounds insane. You mean
well,
to
and
tell
then
me the Army and the Navy?
the reality too, is the fact that the referendum was on the popular side of keeping the union together. And so when we
Yup.
look at that, of course, people were like blown away by that. People are never going to admit when revolution is lingering in the background. They're never going to admit it because at the end of the day, they're scared and they don't want to acknowledge that they could possibly lose everything or that they could gain everything. They are taking a
Yup.
chance. They are taking a risk. They're doing the one thing that capitalism prides itself on, but it actually isn't doing, right? So yeah,
Mhm.
revolution is a risk, and people need to understand this. This is what we actually need to convey to the right wing aisle of the working class so that we can bring them over to us. If they so are hell bent on this idea that capitalism is all about taking risks, they need to take a risk for themselves. They need to liberate
Mhm.
themselves. They're not going to do this if we just
Well,
continue to say what we've been saying and say, oh, it's not possible. Oh, it's not going to happen. It can happen and
well,
it will happen.
Well, one of the hurdles you run into when it comes to massive society, just basic population wise, whether it's America, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, Germany, name any nation that has, let's say, a population above 100 million people, which is a good amount of them, let's say. The issue you run into is, even if, let's say, you successfully in America, as the example, you got 80% of the population to join your side. Like, let's say when shit goes down, or maybe let's say a peaceful reformation happens, a new enlightenment era due to your ideology takes hold and roots out the old world for the new world to be born. That lasting percentage, that 20%, is still hundreds of thousands, 200,000, maybe a million, maybe 10 million people that can still cause problems. Like, we are at the same time an interconnected world, which is good if you need help, but it's also very easy for your enemies to harbor more resentment and anger. So it kind of cuts both ways. You don't get everybody. That never happens. Like, again, you keep looking like the white and red revolution of Russia. When the Bolsheviks were fighting the Tsar army and all that shit, it wasn't just the red army here, the white army there, and they fought. No, there were fucking Republicans, there were nihilists, there were
Right.
socialist groups that were breaking up, like the Russian Navy. You have the anarchist groups. I mean, even Serbian Black Hand were involved. It was all these factions fighting each other, and sometimes they were fighting their own allies because there was one disagreement. And so it was just a cavalcade of psychopathy. It was essentially just called the fratricide years for the longest time because it was so unhinged.
Yeah.
Well, then
If
it's
you really
also
think about it,
like,
like Germany before the Nazis took over had its like warlord era of China. Like, the Chinese warlord era
Yep.
was like, the early 20th century. But like Weimar Republic, the interwar period was effectively that. You've had like everyone talks about the Weimar Republic being like a model liberal republic. Do you know how many times there were like, coups in that republic? It wasn't just Hitler. You had the Kaputch, you had several like, Bolshevik like, Soviet like uprisings that were trying to overthrow the government. It was basically a warring states period for Germany, which is kind of the ironic part.
no, it was. You know why? It was a dying system that fell to some extent into barbarism. You know, I keep having to bring it back to the roots of theory so that we can actually create new ideas in the modern context, because the left isn't doing this. They're regurgitating old projects that have failed and failed and failed, and they're stuck on this hell-bent copy-paste mentality without looking at where they failed and how to overcome those failures. But Rosa Luxemburg put it in the most phenomenal way possible to look at it and objectively understand it. Socialism or barbarism, right? You do not have a choice. You are either going to continue to have a successful proletarian revolution, you're going to make the advances that are supposed to come after capitalism to make the society better for the most amount of people, or you're going to fall into a barbaric state of society where it is warlords over coups, over chaos, right? And this is what happened in the Weimar Republic. This is what has happened historically with the Ottoman Empire. This is what happened even shortly before the Bolshevik Revolution. The Tsarist regime was falling into barbaric structures. This is what happened in the Hungarian uprise. This is what has happened in the fall of the Japanese Empire. You look across history, and everywhere that socialism has either failed or hasn't come about, something has come about first, and we have had to overcome those challenges. And oftentimes, we don't usually overcome those challenges in the best practical, pragmatic way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just so it's heartbreaking kind of to see where we are in the modern context of working class people and realize even though these ideas that we have are most favorable today, there is still
What
this
if we go?
contingency to be anti everything about these ideas.
What if like we're like literally on a Soviet style collapse of the United States, and there's going to be like a whole bunch of like brokenhearted boomers, and then we end up going through like the '90s Russia, but for
I
the
wouldn't
United
Oh,
be
States version.
surprised.
well, well, I mean, I can kind of speak to that. I think that's kind of the
Go for it, man.
inevitability. I mean, like
That's depressing.
when we were going, huh?
Go on. I said it's depressing.
Oh, Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, I was speaking about this for a while to my buddies. Before the election, I essentially told them flat out, not to be like the stereotypical Russian doomer here, but I mean, I don't think that whether Kamala got in, whether Joe Biden got in, or
It was
even
going to
if Donald
happen.
Trump is successful, it was going to happen regardless. I mean, the tension and the fracturing is too much. The economic
Yeah.
structure of the world and domestically in America is just too much. Like we are reaching a point to where that there's no real recovery. The only thing you can hope for is essentially someone can lighten the load before we hit the cliff to where the
Well,
impact isn't too severe. But
I think we're
regardless, you're
already
going to
seeing
hit that cliff.
I think we're already seeing these pockets of like isolated zones of different states that are setting up their own systems and constructing their own systems. I think we're already seeing this happen, right? You look at New York with Mamdani, you look at Texas with its current elections, you look at California and how they've been kind of open, like becoming more open about criticizing the current administration. You see how like some of these southern states are like still hell bent on keeping those conservative values. Like here in my state, DeSantis is still sucking the dick of Trump. I think we're going to see a fracture of the union. The United States is falling apart,
Yes,
and it's a matter of time.
it won't. Yes, it will be that's a good point to put. It's not a complete destruction, it's a fracture.
It's a
There will
fracture.
still be some type of United States of America, whether it is, let's say it goes from 50 states, let's say 35 states, 25 states, maybe the original 13. There will still be some form of America. But when you tell your children in the future, there used to be an America to where it went from coast to coast. We went so far to the island of Guam. We had Puerto Rico. We owned Panama for a moment. We had it all. And your son's going to look to you and go, I couldn't imagine that, Dad. I mean, have you seen
Yep.
what the West Coast believes about us? Have you seen what
Yep.
Texas did to our armies 5 years
We're
ago?
at that
Dad,
point
you
now.
fought in the front lines of
Oh, dude,
Montana.
November.
How could you
To
say
get you to
that?
meet Empire. He's a really cool person. All right, yo, Empire, come to the stage, man.
Funny enough,
Yeah,
funny enough that this guy just came into the audience. Very, very ironic seeing as
Quality
the topic.
conversation keeps going up. Now we got November. Now we got Empire. What's up, dude?
Yo,
how's it going, man?
No, but you're absolutely right,
This is my
November.
buddy Empire. Met him on the conservative server. We were talking. We were just kind of chilling and chatting, talking about the cost of living stuff like that. But I'll let him introduce himself. It's probably better if we do that. Also, we're doing a live stream, just in case you don't want to reveal any info that you don't want on a live stream. Well, it's not a big deal. We'll probably end up privating it if you really asked us to, so it doesn't really matter. So, if you wanted it, but yeah, just forewarning.
okay. I'm only on
Cool.
for a little bit, but what are you guys talking about?
So yeah,
We're talking about a possibly Soviet-style collapse of the United States and like the 10 years, like the 90s for Russia, being something similar that the United States might have.
Oh yeah, I mean that's an interesting proposition. I don't think that our fall is going to be in that manner and not in a Soviet-style collapse. I think what'll end up happening is that we won't balkanize. The reason why the Soviet Union balkanized so quickly was because different ethnic groups were predominant in different geographic areas. They already had a Belarusian province, they had a Kazakh province, they had all of those that, and technically they were Soviet states, right? So when it
Yeah.
balkanized, it got to balkanize very quickly because it was based on both religious and ethnic grounds. One of the most interesting ones is the Armenia, Azerbaijan, the different provinces or different Soviet states under Azerbaijan and Armenia, where the Soviets purposely created ethnic enclaves to keep them technically integrated but also separated, which has led to the current problems in those two regions. But we won't balkanize in that saying we're too ethnically intermixed.
and
If you look down,
that's important to
I
acknowledge, right? If we shatter as a country, if we fracture, because I don't think that we're going to have a complete utter collapse, right? I think if a revolution breaks out, I think if multiple revolutions break out, we're going to see this factionizing of the union at large. I don't think it's going to be based on any ethnicity or nationality or any sort of like religion. I think it's going to be based
mhm.
more on political values, economic values, and
Yes.
where people are baseline, like what positions are they upholding? Because right now, you look across the US and you have vast different thoughts and opinions and and perspectives that are all clashing right now. This infighting of both major parties is screwing up everybody in the long run.
Well, what
Yeah,
you're saying is interesting, but like at the core, at its real core, if there is a civil war, it will not be in any real shape or form the way that people think it is. It's going to look more like the Troubles. It's going to look like a
yes,
very strong period of instability because, and this is unique to America, the areas where there would be a civil war, which is or where the conflict is based on, is the rural urban divide. And the thing is individual cities in the United States, except those on the coast, are for the most part surrounded by deep red, and they're surrounded by people that where you get your food from, where you get where the transportation comes through. These cities are not independent devices, right? Chicago cannot survive unless it's connected to something. Outside of probably New York City and a handful of Californian cities, you will never have an independent city in the United States that can function as this base. So what will end up happening if there is going to be any kind of actual collapse would be that New York and its surround and each of these cities would operate as city states. New York specifically, and the California cities, probably Portland, Seattle, right? That would be what it would actually look like. They would have some dominance within their immediate region, but for the most part, these cities would have to depend on outside trade, because if there was an actual civil war, the cost for what would happen would simply be that, quote, Republicans would cut off the spigot of food. That would be, the cities do not produce enough resources, and they would need to import tons and tons of food from other places. Independently, I do not think we would ever actually see the collapse of America. We do not have a functional ability for each city to be its own state. And the areas surrounding these cities are deep red and unlikely to fall to any amount of armed movement by these cities. So we're left with this really interesting environment where what will end up happening is that most Americans aren't going to support a balkanization campaign because it is going to end up harming them, even within the Republican side and even within the Democrat side.
I don't think that's something that's going to be like thought about, right? Like I think history has kind of shown, right? When we go into economic despairs, when we go into economic crises, yeah, there's always after every single collapse, a short period of time of suffering, of loss, of mass death, of mass struggle, and then the rebuilding process occurs, the reindustrialization process occurs, and there's a boom in all aspects of life and economic and political stability. And so I don't think it's going to necessarily have to be like balkanization style, but maybe something like when let's look back a little bit further. Roman Empire. The Roman Empire collapsed and the Byzantine Empire formed, but the vast majority of the West, which collapsed in the Roman Empire, broke into a lot of independent autonomous regions that were controlled by hotspot rich states that would have to exert authority and force and political kind of pressure around its region. And so that could happen, right? Like New York can definitely impose some sort of economic dominance over some of the smaller states around it, like New Hampshire, Vermont, New Jersey. Sacramento could definitely, or LA could definitely do this in California with some of its surrounding regions of California that are kind of more suburban like, because they would have to depend on a hotspot of wealth in order to, you know, import and export resources so that these suburban and rural areas could survive. If a civil war breaks out, which is likely to happen, I think, within the next century, um, there could be this possible scenario where it's no longer a divide between South and North. It's not going to be a divide between West and East. It's literally going to be multiple different states that are factioned up because the infighting of these major parties, the two-party system is largely failing. You have the Whigs on one side, you have the Libertarians on another, you have the your centrist or moderate liberals on one side, you have your democratic socialist in another area, you have your environmentalist in another, right? So you would just see this fracturing of the two-party system to a point to where the states which certain ideas are more abundant and thought on, that's what's going to be like the leading and dominant kind of ideas in those areas.
I just don't see that fracturing in how you see it. Because the thing is that again, you're correct in that. Well, first to raise your first point, after a civil war, there is massive rebuilding and there is a massive economic boom. Partially because the economy is now destroyed, but also partially that there's new that the power structures are now in flux, and so there's rapid growth and there's rapid expenditure. So what we see a lot of times is that after a civil war, because the old class is dead or weakened so sufficiently, it allows for a lot of disruptors to come in and try new things. And that's really where the growth is coming from. It's the disruptors that are finally able to
Like a
get their
shark in
chance to
water.
disrupt. Yeah.
I can
And then
smell the blood.
pretty much. And then on the opposite end of that, right? When you talk about that, you're not going to see. So you have to remember the difference between how it was in Europe at the fall of the Roman Empire, right, and the fall of the Byzantines, is those places are all relatively close to each other. They're only divided, these city states were only divided and only farther apart by 60, 70 miles at most, right? These cities will not, in America, are divided by great distance. There is no way for LA to form an alliance with Chicago for that to operate, because the thing is that, and it's the same thing that happened in Afghanistan, right? You have to make sure, if that's the case and you want to integrate this and you want to be integrated in these city systems, right, you're going to have to protect your road system the entire way through to have stable trade. If I picked off, just for example, if a militia group picked off 1 in every 10 trucks, right, the amount that the city could bring in for food or for support drops dramatically, meaning that essentially, even though there are people that would definitely want a civil war, the idea that anyone would be independently able to support it is going to put off the idea that there could be a civil war in the respect of what we're facing. Instead, what we will face is a restructuring of attacks. What will end up happening is that you're going to walk down your street and some politician is going to be there and boom, car's going to explode.
Yep.
And you're going to go, holy shit, what the fuck was that? And then later on, you're going to read in the newspaper that some dude some politician got sniped. What it's going to end up happening is what happens right now in Mexico is a really good example, right? What's going to happen is politicians that stand up for anything are going to get sniped, killed by powerful organizations in the background, whether or not they're militias or Antifa or whatever the fuck you would like to
Cartels.
call them, and lone wolves as well. So I think the idea that everybody has about what a civil war in America will look like, the idea that there's ever going to be a meetup of, oh, we're going to move the National Guard of Ohio and that's going to go against the National Guard of Indiana, and that's how this is going to be fought, right? Or it's going to be North versus South or East versus
Well, I
West
said it
or
already
Northwest.
earlier, and I don't think you
It's
were
not
here
going
when
to
I said,
happen.
I said this when I think before you got in, but I don't believe that revolution is just taking up arms and shedding blood, right? I never believe that's what the revolution is. Um, I believe that revolution is a process of undergoing the transformation of material conditions. It is the contradiction between material conditions and metabolic tensions, right? And so it is a long undergoing process of rapid transformation and political discontent. We don't have to be picking up arms and going to war with other states around us to have revolution. Honestly, I could say right now, there's a revolution going on in America right now. And I say that because there is a transformation of the political discourse. There is a dying of the culture war at large, and there's this recognition, this awareness that is coming to the forefront, this growing class consciousness that is happening where people are more aware and are now taking up real action to change the situations in their local environments. I mean, I've seen it myself. I wrote I've wrote on the housing crisis and housing alternatives, how to build structures to be alternative to the housing market. And my articles that I've wrote, my positions that I've wrote have actually been helpful to some DSA chapters and some PSL chapters to where they've built like nonprofit homes and cooperative housings in different states and in different cities. This is what a lot of people are waking up and doing now, where they're really getting involved in their local politics and they're changing things to improve the conditions around them with their community. Because at the end of the day, we're always going to follow into that, again, that's tribal warfare mentality. People are pragmatically always going to do what is in the best for them and for the people that they care about and the people of their community first, because you cannot unite people when there's still this superstructure that is imposing its cultural division on us, where there's this left-right dichotomy that is a falsification that people are still falling to. So there doesn't need to be this national, overthrow, this national rise of revolutionary civil war content. We are actively in a revolutionary process that is undergoing and unfolding right now.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
calling it revolution is a bit much. I think that it comes down more to pragmatic reformations happening amongst the citizenry rather than any kind of actual coordinated revolution of any sort. And I know you didn't say that it was coordinated, but I think at the higher level, what you were describing is coordinated. What we're watching is, and I think
I
the
think
diagnoses of it, hold on, I'm almost done. The diagnoses of it is very much that we are an imperial state with an imperial core. And for a long time, we have allowed our imperial core to be hollowed out. Tim Dillon, who I don't really like that much, but Tim Dillon raised an interesting point, which is our parents' generation, right, was fine with the idea of bread and circus, because in the end, what they had accessible to them was cheap homes, good wages, and they could go on vacation every, year or every other year, right? So for the majority of Americans, it always made sense to just keep your mouth shut, right? It didn't make
yeah,
any sense to oppose anything because you received all the material benefits of empire. Who cared that in China they
bingo.
were producing? Who cared in China that they were producing in a sweatshop? The worst thing that you would ever hear is, "Hey, finish your food. There are kids in Africa starving." Right? That was
Yep.
the
Yeah.
that was the consensus. Nowadays, what you hear is finish your food. We don't know when we're going to be able to buy more. Groceries are very expensive. This is the first time we've had eggs in, a week or two, right? So the material conditions within the empire have been hollowed out. And we're what
Anyone remember 99-cent eggs?
Oh my
Yep.
God.
remember
Yeah.
a
Not
dollar
anymore.
99 cent gas?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that was just like kind of like a brief amount of time when, like, kind of, there was like that fucking, like, scare with the chickens, and then like this is, I want to say, it was mostly the government's fault, right? It wasn't even like really the avian flu or whatever. They were just overpaying farmers to kill chickens, and farmers were like, "Oh, you're overpaying us to kill chickens. We'll kill a lot of chickens, and you have to pay us," right? Like that was
Yeah, they had
literally-
they had the wrong incentive structure. I think I talked with you and Empire about that. It's like
yeah.
they just paid people to kill chickens and then farmers just killed them in a mass. This is what I'm so sick and tired of. Okay, it's like, there's not any common sense for the global. That's actually what I'm going to be doing in my next video, is talking about there's no sense of logic for the betterment of society. It's like, why would you do that? Great, you got yourself a couple extra bucks, but what expense? You literally caused a fucking chicken shortage because you wanted to get a couple extra bucks from Uncle Sam. Okay, like a little bit of common sense is okay. We're only going to call what's needed for the preservation of a stable food supply, but they don't do that shit. It's all about how much I can basically squeeze out. It's the same thing with the rental properties. It's like we're going to increase rent by $1,000 a month because we lowered interest rates, and now that caused property prices to skyrocket again. So now we got
Right.
people cornered even more, so we're going to raise rent even more. That means
Right. And if
GDP
you've
go up. It's not real value. It's
and if
fake
you've
value.
noticed,
It's just numerical values.
if you've noticed, they've done the same thing in housing that they've done for so long in food, which is this artificial scarcity. And they're using this artificial scarcity to make made up numbers to allow them the justification to raise the prices and to, say that we need higher demand, but reality is we don't. And to be frank, right, the cost of housing prices along with the expenses of food, it's ridiculous. We are being deprived of our value, and we do not generate any quote unquote real value as American workers. This is largely because what we do is debt backed, which is a huge problem, right? I've said a lot that I think we should go back to gold backed currency. Gold backed is honestly materially backed is probably the best scenario for reindustrializing any society and any economy. But aside from that, right, looking at where we are in all of these markets where there's artificial scarcity, they allow themselves a justification to raise prices, to raise the cost of living, to raise the cost of supplements. And so now we are paying more, we are being cut out more from actually being able to fulfill ourselves. And
So here's kind of the thing, right? Because I kind of want to talk about the Fed rate cut because that just came in. I'm pretty sure you guys heard about it. They dropped it by 25 basis points apparently, like either
Yeah.
today or yesterday. Okay.
Yep.
And the thing is like I don't think that like it really depends on how this is going to go out because they did panic rate cuts in 2008 and that didn't stop a crash either. Okay, because it really depends. When they did the rate cuts back when COVID happened, that's when we had supply chain issues, and you know how supply and demand work out, right? You have a supply shortage and you have now a bunch of extra liquidity flowing around, so demand skyrockets. Of course, prices are going to go crazy too. Okay, now here's kind of the thing: when prices are high and it's something that's a producible good. Houses are a good example of that. Okay, who wouldn't want to build houses when prices are sky high? Who wouldn't want to build widgets when their prices are sky high? Okay, so you're going to build more of this sorts of stuff. Okay, we've been doing that for the last 5 years. I'm kind of curious to see if we're going into another recession because the fact is like I mean I'm personally hoping that they do a panic rate cut even further so I can get a lower mortgage payment and all that sorts of stuff. That's just me talking out my own ass. But the thing is that the rate cuts aren't necessarily going to fix an economy that's already about ready to hit into a recession. The job numbers got revised September 9th, and it found out that over the course since 2024, there have been just under a million jobs less. They were all fake. They were fake. They were wiped away. That was a part of the BLS Bureau of Labor Statistics revision. And so the fact is, there's a good possibility that the recession started in 2024. I have been seeing on YouTube plenty of channels saying, don't change your job for the love of God, is because right now the labor market is incredibly tight. Okay, you got to understand when they report on a recession or they talk about any sorts of things, it's always after the fact, after it's already happened. Okay,
Right.
there you go on LinkedIn, and a lot of these jobs have like hundreds of applicants and stuff like that. That was no different than in 2008. When mass unemployment started happening. That's when things got to turn out. You got to wonder, like, when did they finally announce it? Oh yeah, by the way, we're in a recession. How after the fact did they recognize it? Okay, so that's what I'm curious to see what's going to go on. Is because, in my opinion, I think this is a panic rate cut over the BLS statistics. From the job numbers. I don't know how this is going to turn out because the thing is there's a good possibility that they can just keep lowering the rates and that's not going to fix anything. You know what I mean? They can keep trying to inject liquidity in it, but that's not going to change it. Some things need to bottom out.
Oh yeah, you're right. I mean, the thing is this, right? What we've seen with the Fed right now has been that they've been keeping the rates pretty tight because they're saying
Yep.
that the inflationary period has continued, right?
Yes,
I
I
don't
agree.
know if that's And I don't know if that's necessarily true that the inflationary rate have continued.
Sure.
Usually, the way that they measure it is by looking at the breadbasket, of goods. And
Yeah.
my thought was, and I looked at the report, but my thought has always been that we're not actually seeing what real inflation is versus what we've seen where prices have risen over COVID times, and they're keeping it the same. That
Yeah.
because supply had fallen in 2020 up to 2022 and even going into 2023, that they've just kept those prices or even increased them. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea here is really simple. We're seeing that these companies are still posting very high revenues, right?
Oh, big
Even
time. In
though
2022, they had the biggest profit margins in 2022 to 2023.
so if you're looking at it, these companies are artificially keeping prices high. I mean,
Yes.
within reason of saying, quote, artificially. But my belief is that they've kept these prices high, and so
Because they
it's
know people will pay
reflective.
for it. That's why.
They do know people will pay for it, and there's excuses right now with the tariffs and everything else, right? And so the
That's
competition here is that a lot of the inputs now, some of it's inflation. Don't get me wrong. Some of it is the cost of inputs as well. We're not going to pretend that those aren't actually impacting the price. But I'm saying that a lot of the prices may also just be pegged to pre-COVID or post-COVID pricing, which is
here's
based
an
on nothing at all.
here's another thing. Companies are going to continue charging outrageous part prices so long as they know people are going to pay for it. And this is going to be the most fucked up thing I've ever said. Okay. So hear me out on this one. Okay. The thing is, companies are going to do that because they can. If they can make a profit on it and they can get away with it, they're going to go with it. It's because how supply and demand works is demand is what you're willing to pay for it. Okay. It's also what you can pay for it. And so the thing is that as long as that money exists to be spent, that is demand at the end of the day, right? I was talking to a buddy about it. He's like, "You're always going to need housing, so there's demand." I was like, "Yeah, I might always need housing, but the thing is that person that you're trying to extract $2,000 a month from might not always have money, is because they might not always be employed. And if there's ever an economic downturn where a lot of people lose their jobs, I'm sorry, but there goes your demand." Okay, so they just factored in, buy now, pay later into FICO credit scores. Fun fact, right? So now a lot of people, because they abused, buy now, pay later, quite literally had their credit scores destroyed because of the buy now, pay later stuff, where they're putting groceries on debt, which was kind of stupid and not paying that back, right? Now they're ineligible for getting homes. There goes the demand. It just went bye bye. Okay. And that's kind of the interesting thing, because at the end of the day, it kind of does correct. And I'm not trying to make an excuse for free market capitalism. I'm obviously not really a capitalist these days. But the thing is that, if people don't have money, they're not going to prop up those prices. And the thing is here's how corporations go. This is why I think we're going into a recession. Okay. Because as soon as that demand disappears and they can't get their fat profit margins anymore, what do companies do?
Start cutting
What do they do?
prices.
Yeah.
And start cutting
Well, no,
jobs.
what are they going to do before they start cutting prices first?
They'll
They
start
lay
cutting
people
jobs.
off.
Cutting jobs, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They lay people off, and when they lay people off, that's less people who people who don't have a job don't have an income, so they can't buy things. Okay.
Well,
And when people
they're
can't
already
buy
cutting jobs
things,
right now. They're already cutting
so
jobs right now.
when they don't have jobs, they can't buy things. And when people don't buy things, companies don't make a profit, so they lay more people off.
Yeah, it's a good cycle.
It is the classical tendency for the rate of profits to fall. Is what it
Yeah.
is.
That's what a recession is. That's all it is. It's like, so,
It's-
but that's what companies do.
This
They're
is
like,
an
"Oh my God, my
objective, and
quarterly profits went down. Time to lay off 20% of my staffing
I
force." Well,
have
that's less
seen
buying
Well,
power.
that's
people.
why
I have
so
seen
one of the
people time and
interesting
time
things
again try to
is
say
so
that.
one of the interesting things that Trump just proposed, that instead of doing quarterly reports, we should do
Is
half year
hiding it. Yeah.
half year reports, which is extremely interesting because a lot of people are saying, well, this is going to be that what companies will do is that they're going to, or that he's proposing that because he's corrupt and allow the companies to get away with basically murder. Instead of having to show quarterly profits, they're going to be able to steal as much money as they want in the quarterly period. I don't think that's the case. I think that
I agree.
if we move to a semi-annual reporting period, what will end up happening is that the job numbers, the revenues, all the reporting basically all the reporting data is going to be put off by half a year, and investors won't really know what the picture is here, and so it'll artificially prop up the company for a longer period of time. Now that's actually kind of smart in a really scoundrelly
It's
way.
hiding
It's
recession
hiding.
is because if they're not showing the quarterly reports to investors or CEOs, they're less reluctant to fire the trigger to cut people off and like lay people off. So there's a reason for it. It's not there's more logic in it than people give it credit for, is because they're trying to hide the numbers so people don't panic sell and then start panic cutting.
Exactly. So when people talk about Trump, as much as he's detestable in a lot of regards, what he's proposing actually makes sense here because a recession is, in a lot of words, almost artificial itself.
Well, so then I
It's
kind of
not.
wonder, are they going
I
to mask
disagree. I
this?
think it's something that's a natural life cycle of capitalism, and
Are,
for
are
better
are
or
they
for
going to
worse. Okay.
mask this as like
So
possibly like tax
under
breaks? Because that's a tactic that they could
under
do.
Yeah, under boom cycles, capitalists do a lot of expansion. There's a lot of liquidity, there's a lot of credit, so companies take risk, they try out new ideas.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
thing is those things are, venture capitalist firms. Some of the ideas turn out, they turn a profit, some of them don't, and so they're just kind of forever in debt. Discord's a good example of that. That's funded purely by venture capital, which is fucking unsustainable in my opinion. But the thing is that there are tons of companies that try out things because liquidity is, abundant, and so is credit. And so the thing is, they can take loans and try out new ideas, and then whatever, right? Move on with that sort of stuff, right? But the thing is those bad ideas got to get cleared out. Okay, so eventually you got to find out which ideas are good or bad or whatever, right? And so that's when credit gets tight, and you start going into a liquidity crisis, and there's not any money going around. Okay, and that's why they're lowering interest rates, because they're trying to do effectively a liquidity injection. That's the thing. It's like they're going to start cutting people off, and so they're going to downsize on the jobs and on the programs and the ideas that are not working out, and so it clears the field again to start over again. It's not a
You're
bad
right
thing.
on
Some
that.
things need to die out.
You're right on that, but it's so the difference between a recession and natural. So in that boom period, there are still companies going bankrupt. There's still
Yes.
failures, right? The problem with the recession is that it's a link, or it's basically a chain, and it affects the rest of the market. It's if individually in a boom cycle, what'll happen is a few dominoes fall, but they don't take down the entire machine. During a recession, what ends up happening is it starts as a domino effect. Something pops, some bubble that a lot of liquidity is tied up in pops. And then what ends up
Housing.
happening is that everything ends up going downstream from there. And it takes out everything because the network of capitalism is a web. And when you start cutting down strands of this web, the entire thing falls apart really quickly. And then of course we
Yeah.
reach what's the word we reach a collapse, and then from there we can rebuild again, right? So it's a
Yeah.
self-correction. This recession is a self-correction of sorts. But
Yes.
imagine
It's
like
a correction.
but
That's
imagine this. Imagine that instead of the panic occurring because there's quarterly reports, you break it up by half a year, right? So now so it works in both ways. If you know that there's a crash going on, and that was the word I was looking for, or contraction rather. If you know there's a contraction going on ahead of time, then this doesn't really pull the wool over anybody's eyes. But if all of a sudden, the market isn't posting quarterly reports or posting semi-annual reports, and you don't know that there's a contraction going on, you won't know for another 3 or 4 months. And there's a genius in that, insofar as if everybody has the wool pulled over their eyes, there's no domino effect because it's not all the bad industry that's getting caught up in a contraction. It's good
it's also good
industry
industries.
too.
Yeah, it,
So
it
what ends up
happens
happening?
both ways.
Yeah.
It happens both.
So I
But
think
that's kind of thing.
so the only point I'm
I,
raising is I think there is a
Go on.
brilliant there is an actual brilliance in doing semi-annual reporting over quarterly reporting. I think that makes esoteric sense, but not if the wider market knows there's a recession going on. That would only instill more fucking panic. So it's as usual one of the Trump ideas, and it could definitely go either way. And I have trouble seeing which way it will actually
I'm
go.
going to say something bold, okay? And I know like a lot of Trump supporters get mad when I say this, okay? I do think a recession is going to happen in Trump's presidency. Am I going to say that's because of Trump? No. overdue for a recession for a fucking decade. Okay? Like the thing is that like a recession is something that happens. It's a correction when you have an overvaluation of assets, okay? And that's kind of the thing. It could be any set of assets. Last, bubble was because of mortgage-backed securities and they just assume so much shit was tied up in housing. Go figure. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But the thing is that like it ends up being a correction on asset prices and values. Okay, because I remember because I was looking at an article. I follow a guy on Twitter. His name's Vlad the Inflator. I love him. He's a fucking hilarious guy. Like he's a libertarian or whatever, right? And he was showing up pictures of 2006 where they're talking about you've heard of the 30-year mortgage. Get ready for the 50-year mortgage because skyrocketing home prices. The only way you can afford a house nowadays is with a 50-year mortgage. Right? Sound familiar? Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds very interesting. So the thing is, I welcome a recession is because the fact is whenever you have some asset class that is wildly overvalued than what it actually is, a recession corrects it. Okay, it's because the supply and demands. And I'm going to be honest with you, because house prices have gone way past demand. They've gone past like what incomes normally demand wise can sustain it towards this sorts of stuff, right? And one of the things I said that's going to cause the biggest correction is home builders are on a building spree. Okay, 500,000. There were 500,000 more sellers than there were buyers just literally a couple of months ago. Okay, that was just a couple of months ago. Home builders have been going crazy because who's not going to build widgets when widget prices are high? Okay, number two. You have an entire generation of people. 25% of the housing supply is bound up by institutional investors, whether that be boomers or BlackRock. Okay, BlackRock's more of a contentious player, but the thing is boomers hold a significant amount of properties. They put a ton of their wealth into real estate for whatever reason. Boomers owning between 1 to 9, additional properties. Okay, and here's another thing: 40% of homes have no mortgage on them, so they have a ton of equity built into them. Okay. So the thing is you have the perfect recipe that you have home builders going crazy because existing home prices, because they lowered interest rates back in 2020. Two, you have boomers who either are going to downsize and they don't really have a reason. As much as they would love to cope about the low interest rates and all that sort of stuff, if they wanted to downsize, okay, they could take a significant hit on several of their properties, maybe even a 20 or even 30% cut on their property. They would still have full equity of the property. They would still have a sizable down payment on another property, and they're still golden, even if they took a financial hit on this sort of stuff. Like you have a 450K asset. Okay, you drop it down to 350, but you have full ownership. You don't have any debt into it. You have no principal left on that property. That's still 350K cash you're walking away from the situation from for a property that you probably bought for 30K 50 or 75 years ago. Okay, and so the fact is they have no reason not to sell it at a loss is because it's no skin off of their nose. Now boomers might do it out of spite, but that doesn't really matter is because eventually you can't take your wealth to the grave. And so, either A, you're going to give it to your kids, which they wouldn't do out of ego, or B, it's going to get repossessed by the local government and it's going to get auctioned off at a fire sale. And either way, when this generational cohort passes, it's going to free up an additional portion of the housing supply, and put it back on the market either way. Maybe the kids invest it and then they sell it off because they don't want to manage properties, is because they just don't want to deal with that headache or whatever, right? Either way, all roads lead to the market with those properties. That's going to be a lot of houses that are going to be coming back to the market.
Well,
Oh, absolutely.
So
it was in 2011, I think, right? Eden Medina, she actually wrote she wrote on the cybernetic revolutionaries and technological like politics in Allende's Chile, and
mhm.
she kind of explained it very good. Economics are a cybernetic process. This boom and bust cycle that capitalism goes through, it is a cybernetic process
See,
because
we
it
don't need
is
that in
always
socialism.
seeking correctness.
See, that's the thing with the plan economy. You don't need to have a boom and bust cycle. It's a natural product of capitalism and latency between markets. That's my opinion. I think it's because the fact is, it's like, okay, home builders knew exactly what the demand was for how many homes they needed to produce. There'd be no case of an oversupply and thus like a crash. Okay, like that's just how that works. Okay,
Well, and
they wouldn't have 4
you know
million
why, right?
additional homes in like 2007.
They're already using these planning models on scale, right? Like this is something that I've tried to explain to people in the modern left, especially some of the more like hell-bent like market
Yeah,
socialist and anarchist lately, is that we don't need markets. And here's why: because already massive
correct.
corporations and businesses are already using computational systems and put output matrices planning models. They're using these ahead of time to know their profit and losses before they even enter a product into the
Yeah.
market. They do this precisely because we already exist in a late stage form of capitalism to where the free market is not a thing anymore.
Oh, the free market still exists. I would argue that there's still supply and demand in a lot of
There's
places, even
supply
if
and
people
demand
like not to admit it.
nonetheless. There's supply
It's
and
rigged
demand
for sure.
nonetheless.
Like, don't get me wrong, but the thing
A
is, like,
lot of
these
it,
things
though,
exist
a lot of it comes
pretty
from
independently.
monopolies have to break themselves up internally to replicate competition.
Oh, the Sears experiment failed. That's the interesting thing. It's better to do central planning internally. But that's neither here nor there. But the thing is, I'm just kind of explaining how markets correct themselves. Like, okay, because the thing is like, the home builder doesn't give a shit. He's just going to build properties, and as long as he gets his money, he's going to go away. He doesn't care whether or not the market crashes or whether or not house prices go down in the future. As long as he gets paid for the house that he built, he doesn't give a shit. Okay, and so the thing is that's why I say it's like eventually ends up becoming a correction is because of this latency within the market. It's like, okay, so the oversupply,
You're right.
and then that's an issue. So that's how it works out.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the thing is, with most of this, it's like driving a cruise ship from the back. You're not going to see unless you're able to see up front. You're basically operating on a latency period, and that's where
Yeah.
market has a lot of problems, and that's where a lot of bad waves are created. Is that you have, I mean, individually of what are vulture capitalists and basically vulture rent seekers, most of this badness comes from these latency periods where people can't actually see what's going on, so they either overproduce or underproduce, and then the market has to correct for those. And overproduction is a lot more harmful, so a lot of them aim for underproduction, which again causes prices to rise.
Scarcity.
uh,
Yep.
so the idea here is that there is this natural equation of latency that technology is starting to balance that out in a lot of regard, and it's very interesting because, and you'd raise that point, that in some ways we're entering what is technically central planning,
Yeah.
just on an individual firm level, and that these
Yeah.
firms are actually being able to do this at a very like in more expert level. Now, if you pay attention to how the Soviet central planning worked, going back into the 1950s, 1960s, the reason why communism was going to fail and continued to fail was not only external factors, but that their internal production numbers very rarely met what the reality of the situation was. If you wanted to produce
Yeah.
100,000 ladas, right? You could put that quota out. Didn't mean that you were going to make that quota. And just because of that, you don't even know if you're going to reach those numbers, right? So there's no
See,
actual way you put.
Here's an
Go ahead.
interesting thing. Is because like I think planned economies, and it's going to get better with planned economies. Planned economies are going to get better because computation has just gotten better. In fact, I can probably run on my computer a centrally planned economy. But the thing is what planned economies are really good at, even the Soviet style ones, which use Gauss plan and material balance planning, which I don't personally agree with algorithm wise. The thing about it is, even under the primitive planning methods that the Soviet Union had, one thing that it was really good at was planning things that were well defined. And what I mean by that is that if you knew you needed to produce 10,000 tanks, you could produce 10,000 tanks. Okay. And a lot of the times, like steel, oil, like timber, stuff like that, they could manage these quotas really well. But if you wanted something specialized, like a fucking Labubu or some goddamn consumer product or whatever, right? It
Yep.
was very difficult to do that in socialism. You can look at any social state, North Korea, Cuba, the USSR, right? And they'll tell you straight up, it's like, it's very good at building houses and, building the necessities. And, there isn't much diversity in the grocery stores and stuff like that, getting you the vast majority of things you want, but you're not going to have much luck with consumer things because everything's planned. Okay.
Well,
And
what
so
they were
that's
good
what,
at was economies of scale. That was where
yeah,
communism
yes.
came to. If you have 10, you could fit 10 factories producing the same thing in one single block.
Yep.
It's the benefit here is that is why Detroit took off as well. Detroit's not an example of communism, but Detroit is an
Yeah.
example of what centralizing a bunch of factories looks like. And you can also
Yep.
see it in China right now, where the benefit to Chinese production is that the factories are all co-located in the same location, and that is
And on top
what
of
was
that,
actually the secret. Well, that was what the secret of the Soviet Union was the
they have a
centralization
mixed
of
economy.
factories.
Yes, very much so. I
They have a
mean, you
mixed
look,
economy. That's the interesting thing. Major industry, coal, oil, lumber, stuff like that. The things that I talk about the Soviet economies do. They have state-owned enterprises that do that. All those assets are managed by SOSIC, State Asset Management Committee or whatever, right? The thing is, but they still allow market enterprises to exist within their country to
Well,
do like
one of the
bring to market like consumer commodities. Okay, so like that's one of the interesting things about their economy is because like when it comes to things like electricity or things that need to be centralized, they're a part of the state. They're state-owned enterprises. They're controlled. The profits that they make go into tax revenue. Okay. And so they're redistributed to subsidize whatever social program that they want. And that's how they do it. And so the thing is, that's they operate off the best of both worlds. That's why I'm more of a hybrid economy kind of guy. Even if I were to support Paul Cockshot's labor voucher system, which I do, right, I wouldn't have a problem with a periphery market economy with worker cooperatives.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's exactly kind of what I support, right? Is taking Paul Koch's model and applying that to a decentralized framework where you can have these cooperative and market systems coexisting.
The funny part is, all you got to do is allow labor vouchers to circulate as money, and then there you go. You can facilitate a market economy. It's actually pretty simple.
Oh,
Anyway, I gotta go
labor
to bed
markets would
now.
work
So good night,
fundamentally.
guys.
Nice.
Alrighty, man. I might go crash out myself and head to bed as well. I'm not sure yet. I'm just
Well,
kind
I
of chilling.
think that I'm about to wrap it up myself, so I think that the stream's been pretty good. I think that I'll look over the stream and definitely see how it went. Um, but no,
Okay.
I just wanted to add this one thing in. No, you're absolutely right. One of the beauties of the Soviet Union was the commie blocks, the way that the architecture was like planned out, right? And it's something that has been adapted in Cuba, in China, and it's something that is successful when we allow for these specific zones, communes, or communities to focus on particular aspects, we get better results. They bring up the general rates that we would be looking at, right? Like so, um, happiness, life expectancy, all of these, education, literacy, right? All of these would increase when you subsidize certain zones to certain focuses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody else have anything else they want to discuss?
Not particularly. I mean,
All right. I think that that is going to wrap up the stream. Thank you guys, everybody.
yeah,
Have a good night.
Alrighty.
yeah. Have a good
Take
night.